Thank you very much, everyone. Yes, so over to John to present item relating to Clarion and the Edicat site.
Thank you, Chairman. So just to explain the situation here, this is not an application as such, not a full application for reconsideration, because members have considered the scheme that's on the screen before you now back in October last year, nearly 12 months ago. And the committee resolved to allow at 42 Station Road, Colliers Wood, 2 new buildings. One would be 13 stories high, and one would be 10 stories high. And that would facilitate a mixed use development of 116 residential units and some commercial floor space and associated infrastructure and works. So we took that resolution to approve away with us, and we entered into the Section 106 legal agreement process. And as part of that legal agreement, there were 2 elements in particular that I want to talk to you about tonight. And one is a pedestrian footbridge across the river that you'll see where my cursor is now. And the other is the provision of 2 car club spaces within the site. So both of those members understood were definitely part of the scheme and would definitely be happening if the application was approved. Now, whether either of these elements, to be honest with you, is absolutely fundamental to the scheme and its acceptability is debatable, but there's no doubt that they both bring benefits and it's better to have them than not. And it is absolutely the applicant's intention to still provide both elements, but some difficulties have cropped up as we've tried to finalise the legal agreement. In the case of the footbridge, that's about land ownership. So the bridge would start from the applicant's land and would land on the far side of the river on the council's land. Well, that's not a problem because both of us are party to the 106 agreement. The difficulty has emerged because Sainsbury's actually own the river, that part of the river anyway, and the airspace above it. And so there is a need for an easement from Sainsbury's. And of course, the Environment Agency manages the riverbed, even though the council owns the land, and the applicant needs a riverbed permit as well to be able to land the footbridge there. Now, it seems to me that all parties want this footbridge to happen. Sainsbury's think that it'd be a benefit to them. The Environment Agency has indicated it is willing to issue a riverbed permit, but they want to go through their own processes and protect their own interests, and I can understand that from a legal perspective. And so they don't want to rush to the table now and sign the Section 106 agreement, which again, I can understand. So what the applicant, no, actually, I'll just turn to the car club spaces. Again, there is a provider lined up for those car club spaces, but the car park, the provider thinks that they look a bit tucked away. They're not as commercially well located as they could be. And instead of those going within the site, the provider would prefer that they went in the vicinity of the site instead. So it seems that both of these elements of the scheme are still achievable, but instead of saying they are absolutely definite at this stage, the best, most pragmatic way to proceed with finalising the legal agreement and getting the decision out and allowing the development to start is to say that the applicant needs to use best reasonable endeavours to achieve both. I've used that before and it's worked. It's not uncommon in planning legal agreements, but there's a slight risk because it's not a definite. So what I would suggest to members is that best reasonable endeavours is allowed as the wording in the legal agreement. The applicant has proposed that they will happen for a period of 12 months for the footbridge and 18 months for the car club spaces. The problem with that is if those timescales aren't met, then the requirements fall away. So I think we need to be a little more restrictive than that. And what I would suggest is perhaps a longer period to achieve both, maybe 24 months. And what I would also suggest is that the applicant reports back to the committee on a 6-monthly basis to tell you exactly what those best reasonable endeavours have involved, to make sure you're satisfied that everything is being done to achieve these elements of the scheme that the committee thought were going to be delivered. So I'd add some extra caveats, but subject to that, I'd recommend that the committee joins us in proceeding that way.
Thank you, John. We'll take some questions. I just want to add on this. I think I don't plan on adding to the agenda discharge of conditions for every meeting. We'll be here for a lifetime. But ultimately, it's schemes like this where they were passed predominantly on that as a benefit. We need to be seen not only as residents who pass applications and support building, etc., but also of custodians of the planning system and supporting its confidence and competence. So when things like this do come, we need to just be hot on it. And as John said, be mindful of the risk of non-delivery, which all residents would want. Councillor Mike Brunt, who is a neighbouring councillor, because of the proximity to Abbey Ward, has given a written statement, but I'll ask that to be read out after we take some initial questions and comments, and then maybe go back to any additional questions or comments. So hands up first. I saw Ed, Susie, and then Dan.
Thanks, Chair. Just a concern really about this bridge being delivered. We probably are all very aware of building costs changing very quickly at the moment. Steel, I don't know, I would take it it's going to be steel, this bridge that's going over the river. Is there any way, John's nodding, he's already thinking about it, any way we can put some caveat in that gives us that flexibility? Because what I wouldn't want is to get there and everything moving the right way and suddenly say, well, we can't now afford it because it's going to cost too much to be done. That would be more of a concern, because I'm sure everybody's willing this to happen, wants it to happen from all sides, but cost is an unknown element to a degree with the way things are going, and it would be a shame to fall on that one.
Fair, Susie.
I'm a very rusty lawyer, but when I was a lawyer, best endeavours are very much more enforceable than reasonable endeavours. And looking at page 308, the applicant is therefore requesting the obligation be revised so it requires him to apply for the relevant consents, no time limit, use its reasonable endeavours to obtain all third-party consents. I would suggest, if it's possible, having this down as best endeavours, not reasonable endeavours, should it ever come to enforcement, would make life a lot easier. And the other one is, I totally agree with the 2 years, maybe 3, if we could do it. Realistically, these things take a long time.
Good point. Good legal knowledge.
Following off of Susie, I was asking, what's the maximum time limit we could apply in terms of the extinguishment of duties? Is it 3 years, 5 years? What is it?
Yeah, so maximum time limits, best endeavours versus reasonable, and how do we hedge building costs? Because if I was them, I'll buy my steels now. But what's possible?
So just thinking through those points, best rather than reasonable, definitely. We'll do that. That's no problem at all. Time limits, that's a really good question. There's no maximum as such. Stuart actually made a helpful suggestion that I think is probably worth raising now. It might be an idea to get a development program plan from the developer and tie it in with that, because we don't know exactly how long this development's going to take until they get to the point of first occupation. So long as the bridge is in place by first occupation, I think we'd all be satisfied with that. So perhaps we could get a program plan and tie it in with that timescale, and that would be fairest to everybody. And in terms of cost, yeah, I do think we should cover that point. I'm just thinking exactly how we would do it. Does anyone have any suggestions as to how that could be worded?
I think, okay, I mean, the goal of this is provide reassurance, but also confidence for the applicant to proceed is part of, as part of their 6 monthly report to well, one of the risks of non-delivery is cost. So they need to identify how they mitigate that risk. And then they will tell us either way what they're doing within the 6 months. And if we think it's satisfied enough, we won't say anything. If we think they need to do more, need to do something. Can we, let's take Jill and then we'll go to Mike's comments as well. That may be helpful. Jill.
Presumably when they've costed their building application in any event, for the structures, that would have included the bridge at that point anyway. So they have a foundation to start on. So what I would suggest is, as you have already kind of indicated, that that becomes in a sense not a new application, but a separate project that can be recosted now. And then each 6 months, if they feel they need to adjust and make contingencies, then do it now and not tell us in 3 years' time we never made a contingency. Because I hearken back to the Bishopsford Bridge malarkey here, where the bridge took forever and it cost a lot of money. It was a disaster. Different situation, but there you go.
Yeah, I think you're right, Jill, in the sense that certain things they can hedge, which is materials, certain things they can't, which is labour. But okay, can we get Mike's, would you mind reading out Mike's comments? It may be helpful for this as well.
Okay, so Councillor Brunt wanted the committee to note that whilst he appreciates that it's too late to discuss the merits or otherwise of what is a development on a small site that will impact on the lives and well-being of many Abbey Ward residents in the immediate area, he would like to make the following remarks regarding the bridge and access to the site. On the proposed footbridge, could we put a condition that the developers consult with local residents regarding the design of the footbridge, both potential users of the bridge and those in the vicinity that will be affected, in particular with respect to lighting? The bridge is very close to the rear of properties on Mill Road near its junction with Dane Road. High-level bright lights will have an impact on these properties. Can we require that the plan for lighting be agreed with the council following consultation with those affected? Safety. The footbridge, whether intentionally or otherwise, will be used by both cyclists and pedestrians. The riverside footpath on the Abbey Ward side of the river is used by many local residents for walking and cycling. It is very common for people pushing pushchairs and prams to use the footpath. The junction between the existing footpath and the footbridge will effectively be a T-junction. This is a potential accident spot. Can the council insist on adequate safety measures to ensure that cyclists slow down or even dismount as they exit the bridge to reduce the risk of accidents? Furthermore, that following completion of construction, the safety record of the junction is monitored and that any future safety remedial work is undertaken swiftly by the developer. Environmental impact. There is a wide range of wildlife and plants living in and on the riverbank. Can the council insist that a full habitat survey is carried out before any construction is undertaken to establish whether there are any endangered or rare creatures or plants in the vicinity, and that the construction is undertaken in a sensitive way that protects the riverbank on both sides, regardless of whether rare creatures or plants are discovered? As mentioned, I appreciate that planning permission has been granted against the wishes of many residents, but I remain concerned about access to the properties once completed. The burden placed on Station Road by this development and the one currently under construction mean that around 200 new properties will be serviced by what is a small residential road that until now had had 20 or so residential properties. Is there still an opportunity to review the access to the site using the slip road to the Sainsbury's store? The point at which Station Road crosses the River Wandle will be used far beyond the current level of traffic by heavy waste vehicles and delivery vehicles. The wear and tear on the bridge and the congestion on Station Road will be so much more than the current situation.
Thank you. What I'm going to recommend to us as a committee is, a lot of those are questions, a lot of those impact on the actual previous application, which was before our time, is to take this as an informative on what we've agreed here, because this is the voice of A, a local resident, and B, a neighbouring councillor, or a very neighbouring council with local residents. But at the same time, we've not had, because this is just received prior to committee, planning officers haven't had time to digest this and understand the impact of what this means. And it would be unfair on the applicant to also change the frankly, what was agreed. So an informative seems a fair gather. And frankly, a lot of these actions are for officers to review the pre-existing plans that have been passed as part of the application. So that's what I would propose on that. Any further, John?
No, I agree, and I think the point that jumps out at me from what's just been read was that, yeah, I mean, planning permission has essentially been granted. We've got a resolution to approve. I agree with the informative approach, and we could ask the applicant to address these points along with the review of the costs of the bridge in each update that the committee receives.
Cool, I agree. So let me just recap then and get everyone's agreement and nod. We want to, in this revised agreement, we want to say that, so we want to use best endeavours rather than reasonable endeavours. We want to say that we want to get a development plan through and have this built within the lifetime of that development. And what we're asking the applicant to do is come every 6 months to committee in writing, and where required with notice in person, if we have questions. And as part of that, they need to, in writing, explain the risks and how to mitigate against those particular costs. And we also want, as an informative, those points that Councillor Brunt has made, so that they can be addressed where appropriate. And again, some of those are for officers anyway. Have I missed anything out, colleagues? No? Do we agree? Cool, super. Record time for business on that one. All right, so we'll move on to the next item once John has a second to breathe. All right, so the next item of business will be the development management and building control update on the Galpins Road major incident. And many of you may know what happened. I mean, it's in the community I represent and Martin represents as well, so we're very, very close to it. And obviously it involved a loss of life, which is very, very, very tragic. It is still ongoing, the incident, as we know, and there's every 2 weeks there's a residents meeting, but a part of that is obviously looking to rebuild, recovery, but at the minute it's still about safety and establishing that, and John is going to go through the impact and what that means for the capacity of officers in this regard. John.
Yes, thank you. I've obviously been heavily involved in this for approximately a month and a half now, and yeah, it's been very, very relevant to my service, and I thought it'd be helpful to update members on that basis. It's likely to turn into a planning issue in the future as well, but we had the major incident, and I'm not moving forward now. So we had the major incident. We first heard that there'd been a gas explosion at Galpins Road, Pollard's Hill, just after 7 o'clock in the morning on the 8th of August. Tragically, as Aidan says, there was a fatality, and plus there were hospitalizations as well that unfortunately are still continuing. A major operation then was carried out as we evacuated more than 500 residents from 200 homes. So a major impact, and it was a serious blast. There was damage to a large number of properties, which I'll come on to in more detail, with some, a significant number actually, having dangerous elements. And I'd just like to describe what happened really from a building control perspective. So for those of you who aren't totally familiar with the site, Galpins Road is running through the very centre of the picture there from southwest to northeast. Right on the edge of Merton. All the affected properties were in Merton, but you will see from the image on your screen that, of course, there are landmarks of Croydon immediately adjacent. So right on the edge of Merton and Croydon. And when my officers went out, these were the kind of scenes that they witnessed, and clear devastation there, more serious than we thought when we got the alarm, to be honest with you. And I think there's a fair point here. The point that I'd like to raise really is that you've clearly got the emergency services on the scene there where the blast happened. And one aspect of this that I've had to manage is the emergency services are trained in dealing with obviously quite traumatic events, and whereas my officers aren't necessarily. So one thing that I had to manage was the member of my building control team that turned up on site found this a very, very difficult experience. There's no question about it, to the point where we obviously rotated which officers would attend, because after that first day, the same one wasn't going back for a little while. And yeah, the extent of the damage, I mean, we have all sorts of levels of dangerous buildings. We are going to have to move on to carry out demolition works on some of these properties because they are clearly not safe, not even for a police investigation. Yeah, it's badly hit the properties. There are 3 in particular. We thought there may be 5. It looks like 3 where we are going to have to carry out demolition works very soon. And oddly enough, when we were worried about we say that there's 3 really, that are 3 properties central to the blast sites, and we were concerned about the immediate ones adjacent on either side. Oddly enough, those adjacent ones don't seem as badly damaged as the ones across the street. And we've got approximately 20 properties across the street where the roof tiles are a mess, the windows are a mess, and the blast has clearly gone in that direction, you know, which there's no manual for these things. You don't know exactly what to expect until they happen. So a bit of a closer image there of the damage to the roofs. Of course, these occupiers are not back in yet. Now, my officers have a very specific responsibility when it comes to dangerous buildings that's governed by the 1939 London Building Act, which is still very applicable today. And essentially, the officers in my team can do 2 things. They have to turn up and remove immediate danger. So you saw the loose roof tiles. The officers or their contractors would take away any loose roof tile. Any broken glass remaining in window frames, they would remove that. But it's limited to removing immediate danger. But that did change slightly in 1982 under the Local Government Act, because they can also now board up those window openings. So there are those simple means of making sites safe and taking away immediate danger. But there's clearly a lot of work here. And we do have quite a limited building control team here at Merton at the moment. We've got the team leader, we've got 3 surveyors and an admin officer. So we had to think about how we were going to build capacity immediately in the team to address this situation. And we do subscribe to the arrangement between the London District Surveyors Association and their contracting arrangements. So we do have a particularly strong relationship with Waits Construction. So for example, when the window fell out of Britannia Point in Collier's Wood, Waits constructed the crash deck around the perimeter of that building. And they're a big company. They're always available. They're ready for any emergency situation, to be honest with you. So we've been working with Waits on this, and helpfully, they are also the contractor for the Met Police. So they're going to be working partly for the police and partly for us, and that makes life a lot easier, to be honest with you. And we can also contract with neighbouring authorities. So what we did was I basically gave up development management for a while, and essentially became heavily involved in building control. So I was closely overseeing what was going on. We borrowed a principal planning officer, building control surveyor from Croydon, who actually is out on site tomorrow inspecting a number of properties for us. And with those extra resources and weights as well, we were able to make sure that the service has been represented in at literally every meeting that the council's been involved in. And there have been 2 a day for most days. We've been in the silver meetings and also the gold meetings. So a lot of time has been put into this. So things are moving quickly now. In terms of the process, we've got the area immediately around the blast remains a construction site for Southern Gas Networks. They've taken the main pipe out of the road. They're replacing that. They've handed it over to the police for investigation, and they will leave their construction site next Wednesday, the 28th, which means that the police and Waits and my building control team can all gain access to the site, and the police forensic investigation will begin. And that will take place until around about mid-October. In the meantime, we still have residents that haven't been back to their properties. So what we did in the wider cordons outside of what we call the red zone, I'll come back to the red zone in a moment. In the wider cordons to the south and the north, what the building control officers did, supported by others, was to go in each property and carry out a routine safety inspection. And what essentially that involved was to go in, check that the properties were okay. At first, for residents to go back in with a police officer, at least get belongings and that type of thing, and then moving people, saying to people they were safe to move back into their homes. And we've got all but about 100 residents back in now. But we made all the right calls from both externally and externally. We made all the right calls in saying this building could be checked, see whether it's safe, it's likely to be safe, and the residents should be able to gain access. That's still the case. We didn't go in any properties. There weren't any collapsed ceilings or anything like that. We didn't see anything to that degree that we didn't expect. But to be honest, the impact went probably further and a bit more severe than we thought. So like properties 40 houses away, you go in and the lights were hanging in off the ceilings, things like that, you know. And then, so here's some examples of the outer cordon areas. You'll see there that there are damaged roof tiles. The trouble we've got is we don't know if it was like that before. But having looked at the conditions inside the properties and got the reports back from residents who said that crack was definitely not there, and you know, this type of thing, it is a possibility, you know, that could have been caused by the blast. Again, these are just some of the frontages, quite some distance away. And then you've got, you know, a window hanging off the hinges. And these are all still dangerous elements that we have to clear to make sure that people are going to be safe, or at least advise them that they need to be looking at it. So the first one was this week. We've had plenty of community meetings, but we've agreed to have them on a fortnightly basis. And the first of that cycle took place this week. From tomorrow, we've got an officer on site actually carrying out safety inspections of properties in the red zone. And that means that if they are declared safe to enter from next weekend, the residents, accompanied by a police officer, next Saturday and Sunday, when there's no construction work going on the site. Next weekend, the residents can go in, they get an hour appointment each, and they can go in and collect essential personal belongings. We're going to try and move towards getting more people back home. So we will be meeting with Waits on Monday. And Waits are going to look at demolishing the aspects of the blast zone that are unsafe to enable the police officers to carry out a safe forensic investigation. And ultimately, it looks like those properties will need to be completely demolished, but only after that investigation has been completed. We'll also have a closer look at the closest properties and those immediately opposite. And we will consider all options. We'll look at weatherproofing them. We will look at more substantial remedial works. There's a problem though. That goes beyond what the building control officers are actually legally entitled to do. Now, we can do that if we think that weatherproofing will increase the danger. Waits have advised us that they wouldn't recommend putting tarpaulins all over the roofs, because if they blow off, they can actually cause more damage than they save. You know, they can take extra tiles with them. They don't consider temporary works to be their most viable option. If we really want them to do that, they'll do it, but it may have to come at the cost of the council. The other problem with that is that we've been talking to the Association of British Insurers, and whilst the insurance companies would have no qualms with us removing roof tiles, removing broken glass, acting within our remit, if we did start creating extra costs with extra works, they would question how that affects the policies. So what we really need to be doing is, through the Association of British Insurers and their members, we need to be coordinating and facilitating conversations between residents, their insurers, and ourselves to agree exactly what should happen, what's necessary. And a lot of the residents want us to carry out full structural surveys of their properties. Waits can resource that and we can commission that, but we'd have to pick up the cost. It should really be for people and their insurance to sort that out. There may be cases where there is not insurance in place, and that could be another problem for us that the council will have to consider. So there's a lot going on. I mean, the quickest solution, but again, it's who pays for it. Waits could have a look at doing remedial works and replacing the tiles. The problem is because the tiles have come off and because there's been bad weather, it's likely that that's affected all the timbers. It's likely to be fundamental damage. So you're probably looking at re-roofing the lot. Now, there's something to be said in doing that all in one go. But again, if you're going to do that, then it's likely to be the council that has to pick up the bill. If people sorted it out individually, it should be for the insurance. So it's all very complicated, and there's lots of difficult considerations and lots of difficult decisions to be made. To cover ourselves, we've not done this, obviously, in terms of the next steps. We've not done this because it's so sensitive. We do technically and legally need to issue dangerous structure notices on people. Now, with them being through the trauma that they have, we haven't done that. But we're going to go through a process of explaining that that's the best for them to start getting works done to their properties. And it would also put their insurers on notice that they need to start doing something once we've declared that they can. This has been the third gold emergency in as many months. I've been here 3 months, and we've had Britannia Point. We've had Spur House at South Wimbledon, opposite South Wimbledon tube station. That area is still sealed off where a glass panel fell from a balcony. And then we've had this, and what it's demonstrated to me is the building control service here, it really is important. And, you know, when it's needed, it really is needed. We are still moving forward. We'll be in weekly silver coordination meetings with the health and safety executive, the gas company will be chairing it. also with the police and the council's community assistance team. So we've got all that work to do with the residents. That is still going to impact on my time and take me out of development management. Like I said before, I have spent a disproportionate amount of time really in terms of my overall role on building control because of the circumstances. We are doing something about it. There is a corporate level review of building control being undertaken by my predecessor actually, where we're looking to get the team boosted and get more resources in there. There are other reasons to doing that. They need to win more market share as well off the private sector in terms of doing inspections and plan checking and that kind of thing, but also to make sure that we're fully equipped to deal with emergencies because they do arise. So we're looking to make sure that the council has a service that's fit for purpose. And it's not going to be easy that to recruit, because what I have learned from this exercise, okay, we got one person from Croydon and we had weights there and all the rest of it, but I did get an offer from Lambeth, I think it was, of one person for one day. Sutton said they might be able to provide a person here and there, but it is not easy to get hold of building control surveyors, I can assure you. And even if you look at mutual aid throughout London, all the services are limited. And every building control service in the country will tell you that, but it's a bit different in London. And so I think this corporate review that's going on is really important, and that's where we're up to today.
John, thank you so much. You know, I'm both proud, amazed, and horrified also at the incident. It's really very grateful for you to come and explain that to us, and also the challenges that are still ahead of you and your team. Comments and questions. So Martin and Sherry. Martin
I obviously
first.
know it's obviously a very, very late hour now for all of us, but can I obviously commend the work of obviously officers for everything in terms of Galpins Road. You know, it's been a huge logistical thing. I understand it's been the biggest civil emergency in terms of evacuation of people since Grenfell, which I think shows the sheer scale that we are talking about. And as someone who was on the scene about an hour after it happened, I can tell you, the council officers did come together very quickly in terms of enacting our emergency plan. But it's going to be obviously a great challenge going forward, given that we have 70 households who are still in hotels, and the cost of the whole operation has gone over £1 million, which was at the public meeting the other night. So that shows the sheer scale in terms of civil emergency and emergency control, and things that do need to happen when they happen. And I have a huge debt of appreciation to everything in terms of council officers.
Thank you. Sherry Ann? Good. Well, let's formally make that then. So we formally, for the record,
I would like to formally record a massive vote of thanks to all council officers during a very difficult time, because I can imagine this impacts you emotionally and personally as well. So thank you very, 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 very much.
I really appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and Jules second. So we've got that there. Super. All right. Thank you, everyone. So last item, planning enforcement. Are there any highlights to share, John? Just to say, we were due to go into a bit more depth in terms of the statistics of the plan enforcement, but I've asked the officer to stand down, and we'll bring that back in a bit more detail next time.
Yes, I think the enforcement manager was going to pick up some particular examples in the presentation, which we will roll forward to next time. I think it's just worth mentioning that we had a prosecution case for 7 Streatham Road in Mitcham. We received an application for a certificate of lawfulness for that property, which is insufficient and not acceptable to us. We were looking. No, we're very close to issuing a refusal for that. And then we'll be undergoing prosecution proceedings again to take the landowner back in the direction of court to present the case again, and we will keep going until we reach a satisfactory position. So the priority is to refuse that application. We'll do that, and we'll keep you informed as to how prosecution proceedings go.
Thank you for the update and continuing to do the good work of keeping schemes adhere to the rules and supporting residents. Any questions or comments on that at all? No? Well, thank you everyone for speaking tonight. Thank you, members. I call this meeting to